Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 24th, and we are here with the jam-packed, locked and loaded, super exciting NFC South. We've got the quarterbacks and running backs for you tonight. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Oh, Ben, you know I'm doing great. Our second to last review podcast. We're almost done with the review series this offseason, and just in time for the NFL draft tomorrow night. It's such an exciting time right now in fantasy land. We're going to get some development and rosters tomorrow night, so I can't wait. We saved a great division for last, and what a group we have with these quarterbacks and running backs. A lot of interesting stuff across the board, and a lot of really interesting stats jump off of the page when we were preparing for this podcast. A lot of surprising things here, Ben.
Absolutely, and let's start off with the quarterbacks of this division. You've got an elite group, both overall and points per game. You're looking at a group of QB1s.
Yeah.
Starting off with the New Orleans Saints quarterback, Drew Brees. Coming into the season, lots in the fantasy world automatically wrote Brees off after the 2017 campaign. Even though he still had over 4,300 yards, he was 72% accurate, and he had 23 touchdowns to 8 interceptions with almost a 104 QB rating, which was second in the NFL. Because of that, people were way down on him, undervaluing, and we were calling for a big-time bounce-back season. Well, Jay, we were half right.
Yeah, listen, we were high on Brees coming into the season and a lot higher than other people. We had him ranked as QB2. We were very high on him.
Yeah.
For comparison purposes, Mike Clay had him ranked as QB11 heading into the season. He finished as QB8 overall and QB7 in points per game. But Ben, here are the stats that I want to tell you that prove that Drew Brees still has it. While guys think that he might be starting the decline of his career, he was QB1 in accuracy rate with a completion percentage of 74.4%. Blistering, my friend. And a QB rating, minimum 3 starts, of QB1. He was QB1 in accuracy and QB rating.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Those are elite Hall of Fame level numbers. And what's really impressive, Jay, is that he was only QB 16 in passing volume, 489 pass attempts. Middle of the road. So it's not like his numbers are inflated by a ton of volume. QB 13 with 3,992 yards. I mean, just shy of 4,000 yards. Tied for QB 6 with 32 total touchdowns. And he was tied for QB 5 with 4 rushing touchdowns as well.
Listen, I'm glad you bring that up because that was part of the knock of him coming into the season was that team was going to focus more on the running game and less on the passing game. And that was going to be a part of the reason for Drew Brees' decline. However, what we saw was, yes, there were fewer passing attempts, but he was still able to be a rock-solid QB1, even with limited weapons in the receiving core, even with limited weapons at tight end, and with a backfield where they lose the traditional running back this season, and they keep the pass-catching back heading into 2019 in Alvin Kamara. So, look, I'm still high on Drew Brees. He has shown that he can still be a rock-solid QB1, even without being a volume-based quarterback, and I love that.
I completely agree with you, and in way too early ADP at fantasyfootballcalculator.com, 12-team PPR leagues, he's going 71 overall as QB6 behind A-Rod and Deshaun Watson and in front of Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson.
Wow, I mean, that's a group, man, and we're going to get into some of them here in a little bit. I have no problem with that price. I'm actually surprised that he's going that high. People are bouncing back on Drew Brees, and they've seen what we've seen.
And again, it's so early in the offseason. I'm really looking forward to seeing how these ADPs shake out. I feel like there's going to be some ADPs that get better for us and some ADPs that get worse for us as we get closer. But, you know, you look at Drew Brees back to 2017 with that 72% accuracy. In 2018, he improves that to 74.4. You look at in 2017, his quarterback rating of almost 104. In 2018, it's almost 116.
Better.
You know, yeah. I mean,
like a fine wine.
The efficiency accuracy and the precision is there. The volume is sustainable and might even go up a little bit. And I just think that group and that value is extremely interesting. And look out, if that ADP for him drops at all, I all of a sudden love that value.
And we talk about it all the time. I can't argue with the guy's price where he's going right now based on what he's done. But like we always say, we would love to get more value out of every player that we draft. And that's true of Drew Brees as well. And if they can get some help on that offense in the receiving core, they still have Alvin Kamara. He is going to be the focal point of that backfield, a great pass catcher. There is still value in Drew Brees, and he is still elite in this league. Let's move on to a little bit more of an interesting situation, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't even know where to begin with this, Ben.
Well, first up, coming into the season, you had Jameis Winston. We were passing on him vehemently because, he poor ball security, bad decision making, 3-game suspension. He was preseason total Foresight's QB 17. Mike Clay didn't even have him ranked. He's being drafted as QB 20.
Just crazy behavior. A guy who the franchise wasn't sure whether or not he was going to be their guy long term. There were a lot of question marks entering the season, and with his 3-game suspension, there were certainly reasons for pause. Absolutely.
Yeah, and in his 11 games this season, there were times where he didn't play well at all. Times he got benched. He ended up being tied for QB 14 in fantasy points per game, but just a very typical Jameis type of season where he shows all the talent in the world in flashes, shows very poor decision making and really immaturity in other situations. And we were both really disappointed throughout the year that they went away from our guy. The early story, at the beginning of this season was really Ryan Fitzmagic setting the world on fire. In weeks 1, 2, and 3, he was QB1, QB6, and QB8.
That is true. And then I believe was week 4 when they went to Chicago and just got blasted.
I don't remember where they were, who they played, but I know that week 4 he was QB bad.
Yeah. And he was going undrafted. Ryan Fitzmagic, look, he's out of town. He's gone now. He is now the man in Miami for the time being. We had him unranked. He was pretty much unranked everywhere because we knew he was only going to get 3 games, and then that situation was going to get very murky once Jameis came back. He finished QB 28, but Ben, he finished QB 4 overall in points per game. That's elite.
like we said, he set the world on fire in those first 3 games. He had a bad week 4 performance. Then they went back to Jameis, and then they went back to Fitzmagic in week 8. He was QB 13 in week 8, QB 6 in week 9.
And he was QB 9 in QB rating, though. Even though he had some up and down performances, he was still QB 9 with a minimum of 3 starts in QB rating, and he was QB 13 in accuracy above 66%. So that whole offense all season was a roller coaster ride. They would light it up some weeks, and then just, they'd run into a defense and just get shut down. So, I get it, there was a lot of inconsistency, but really if you look at the body of work, Ryan Fitzpatrick put together a pretty darn impressive fantasy season if you look at his QB finishes as a 1, 6, 8, 13, 6, and 20 with a couple of bad performances in there. That's still better than a lot of guys in this league.
Yeah, pretty much he had, I believe these 8 games were 8 starts, and half the time he's a QB 13 or better.
Right.
And then he's got a ceiling of a QB1 with those weapons. Now, he doesn't have those type of weapons in Miami, right, and that's why he's undrafted going into next season, but he's definitely on the streamer radar. And if from a volume standpoint in that offense, if you look at Jameis and Fitz's combined passing attempts, that would equal 624, which would have been QB3, which is interesting to watch with Jameis going into next season because that plus Bruce Arians equals a lot of opportunity, but can Jameis improve his accuracy and protect the football? I don't know if Bruce Arians can fix that. And right now, Jameis is going at 103 overall as QB 12 behind Cam and Goff and in front of Phillip Rivers and Big Ben.
Listen, man,
who do you not prefer over Jameis Winston in that group?
I have seen a lot of guys who are high on Jameis Winston going into the 2019 season. And I'm sitting here looking at stats like QB 21 in accuracy, QB 26 in quarterback rating. I'm sorry, man. I am not buying into that whatsoever, especially when he's going around guys like Jared Goff, Phillip Rivers, Big Ben, and guys who have produced at the fantasy level at elite levels.
And I just don't trust him.
Exactly. That's it.
I don't trust him, period. I don't trust his decision-making on or off the football field in preparation for the game.
Listen, man, we're talking about fantasy football here. We talk about practice. We talking about fantasy football. All right? The whole reason we play this game is to win championships. Are you really going to put Jameis Winston in charge of your team to try to win you a fantasy championship or a best ball league or whatever it is? That's the guy you're going to put at the helm? No way.
I can already see it now, Jay. In our preview pods, this is going to be one of our guys where it's the masses versus us, and we're saying no way on Jameis. But right now, let's move on to another elite level performing quarterback this season.
Okay.
Atlanta Falcons quarterback QB Matt Ryan. Coming into the season, Matty Ice's recent fantasy finishes were QB 15, QB 2, QB 19, QB 7, and QB 15. He was a QB 1 level top 12 quarterback every other season. Coming into the season, we liked his QB 13 price, but we did prefer everybody else going around him at the time. And we had him ranked in the preseason total Foresight did as QB 16. Mike Clay pretty much agreed with us as having him as QB 15 and ended up, Jay, as QB 2 overall and QB 2 in points per game.
Ben, I have to admit, I don't know where I was last season. I thought I was playing fantasy football pretty attentively last year. I had no idea Matt Ryan put together a fantasy season like this. And not only that, a football season like this. The guy was QB4 in accuracy, QB4 in QB rating, QB3 in pass attempts, QB3 in passing yards, and QB3 in passing touchdowns. I had no idea.
Yeah, man. Then he tacked on 3 more rushing touchdowns, which was tied for QB 7.
I apparently did not have enough shares of Matt Ryan in 2018. Holy smokes.
So with the fantasy football season that we just described for Matty Ice, Matt Ryan, you would think that the offensive coordinator is probably in pretty good graces over there, wouldn't you, Jay?
You would think so, yes.
No, they fired him. I mean, I don't know what was necessarily wrong with that offense, just at least when you're looking at it from the standpoint of Matty Ice's numbers.
Yeah, they jettison Steve Sarkisian and they bring in Dirk Cutter.
So the reason that it's relevant from a fantasy impact standpoint, when you look at Matty Ice going up and down every other season, a lot of times that is associated with an offensive change, an offensive scheme change, an offensive coordinator change, a head coaching change, what have you. But it seemed like this is another situation, just like Kyle Shanahan, where Matt Ryan's in a situation where he's thriving, probably happy with the direction that the offense is going.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden he's got to learn a brand new offense, a brand new system, and adjust all over again. So my question to you is another down year coming, Jay?
We just saw it under Steve Sarkisian. You know, we saw him finish as QB 15 and then QB 2. So it seems as though it always takes Matt Ryan a couple years to get fully integrated and comfortable in an offense. So yeah, I could see a little bit of regression coming in. And you mentioned it, you know, prior to the podcast, that there was a lot of volume in this pass offense this year. And can you depend on that once again in another season? Look, every season is different. Can you expect him to be QB3 in pass attempts once again with a new offensive coordinator? And will that translate into another top-end QB finish? I don't know. I don't know, Ben.
And the honest answer is maybe. Right. We don't know.
Right.
And you have a history with him of that up and down. Yep. And then what's it always come back to? Value, price, cost.
You got it.
So right now he's going 75 overall as QB7, right behind Deshaun Watson and Drew Brees and right in front of Russell Wilson and Carson Wentz. It's a mixed bag for me there, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
But Matt Ryan is definitely not in my top 2 of that group for sure. Maybe not even my top 3.
I was very surprised at his fantasy finish last season. I had no idea. I don't know what I was doing to miss that, but I have seen a lot of people very high on him heading into 2019, but I think for the reasons you and I just discussed, I'm not going to be quite as high. I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant and give a little bit more pause to just keeping an eye on that situation and how that offense starts to look and unfold and what I hear coming out of Atlanta heading into the 2019 season before I'm willing to invest that kind of price in Matt Ryan for my team.
And I completely agree with you. The one other counter evidence that we have right now is the fact that everybody's talking about since the schedule release, that Matty Ice has 13 of 16 dome games this season.
Ooh. There is that.
There is a lot of correlation with fantasy performance in dome environments for sure. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of off season left to play.
That's true.
It's just fun to kind of play the game at this point, but they'll definitely change as we get closer. Wrapping up the quarterbacks of this division, we've got the Carolina Panthers quarterback, Cam Newton.
Coming into the season, similar to Matty Ice, Cam's recent fantasy finishes were QB2, then QB17, QB1, then QB17, then QB3. So he's an elite QB1 every other season. We're looking for consistency here. We were hesitant on his QB6 price because of durability concerns. Ben, we nailed that one.
Yeah.
And due to his poor O-line and his style of play. So that's ultimately what we saw play out.
Yeah, I mean, we had him ranked as QB5 going into the season. Mike Clay had him even higher as QB3. In points per game, he ended up as QB8. And he battled through some injuries before ultimately tapping out for the season.
Right.
And that's what I attribute his QB8 in points per game to, which isn't bad.
No.
But I think we really nailed it with our QB5 ranking in Total Foresight. If he would have been healthy and would have got to continue playing, I would have loved to see how he would have ended the fantasy season because he had a really nice playoff schedule. I traded for him mid-year with my eyes on that playoff schedule. And it just wasn't meant to be, unfortunately.
No. And I remember some of those podcasts last year when his performances started to go downhill. We knew something wasn't right. And it took a couple weeks before news started to leak out that there were some issues with the shoulder. And actually, I believe, Ben, we were pretty early in on those assumptions. And that's what ended up being the case. His shoulder wasn't right. And he ended up having arthroscopic surgery on that shoulder in January. And he's back to working out. So I'm sure he's going to be ready to go for week 1. But, you know, just that's something to keep an eye on. You never like seeing a shoulder injury with an elite quarterback like him. But right now, he is going in the way too early ADP as 97 overall in QB 10. So a lot of people think he's going to be right back where he belongs as a QB 1 in the NFL.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting about Cam always is that you wonder, is this the season where he's going to kind of change his style of play so he avoids taking so much punishment? Because even though he only played 11 games last year, Jay, a lot of his fantasy production is supported by the fact that he is QB2 in rushing attempts, he is QB4 in rushing yards, and he is tied for QB5 in rushing touchdowns. So he's got 101 rushing attempts, 488 yards, 4 touchdowns in 11 games. So,
and he did that with guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Pat Mahomes. And you've got a lot more mobile quarterbacks, and Cam is still QB2 in rushing attempts in only 11 games. I mean, you would think the older this guy gets, the more they would slow him down and let him play from the pocket.
Like you said, right now he's going as QB10, and his situation is one to monitor, because if Cam is consistent with his career trajectory, he is due for an elite QB1 season next year.
That's true. I know. And we just talked about Matty Ice, and that's exactly what happened. So
yeah, so it'll really be interesting to watch and read about his health to see what that does to his ADP looking into 2019. Moving on to probably the most exciting running back group in the NFL.
Here we go.
We'll start it off with the New Orleans Saints, Alvin Kamara.
Keep your composure, Ben. Keep your composure.
Well, that's a little cleaner than the preseason version that I just listened to on my way home from work today. But let's just go through our notes from the preseason verbatim.
Okay.
In 2017, only Gurley, Bell, and Zeke had more fantasy points per game than our guy, Alvin Kamara. He had 120 attempts for 728 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and then he also had 81 receptions on 100 targets for 826 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns, only 1 fumble. So off of only 202 touches, he led all wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends in fantasy points per snap. And while plenty were calling for regression, we were here to tell you not so fast. We had him ranked preseason RB3, and where'd he finish, Jay? RB4.
And RB4 in points per game. That efficiency did not slow down.
No, in yards per attempt, minimum 65 attempts. He was tied for RB18 with 4.6 yards per carry. And then he was RB4 in receptions, RB5 with 709 receiving yards, and tied for RB7 with 4 receiving touchdowns.
And I'll tell you what, I was concerned going into the season because Mark Ingram was going to miss the first 4 games of the year, and we knew Alvin Kamara was going to be relied upon early, and that extra volume early in a season could be some wear and tear he had not seen before. And I was curious to see how he was going to be able to make it through a full season with more volume, more carries, more touches. But he did it, man. He made it through. He was the man.
You're absolutely right, Jay. And what's really crazy about his season, I think the most surprising stat that I saw with Alvin Kamara is that he was RB2 in rushing touchdowns with 14 rushing touchdowns last season. And only 5 of those came in the first 4 weeks of the season when Ingram was sidelined.
Okay, now that's surprising. That's a stat. That's crazy.
Yeah, right? I mean, he had 2 rushing touchdowns week 1 and 3 rushing touchdowns week 4, none week 2 or week 3.
Well, now he's got Latavius Murray backing him up. You know, I can't say Latavius Murray is on Mark Ingram's level. So Alvin Kamara is the man in that New Orleans backfield. His status is secured. It's all it is health now, man. He's going to get the volume. He's going to get the receptions. In PPR, he is going to be the gold standard and the stud. So he is an elite running back at that position and an elite fantasy scorer. And all it is durability. And that's it. And he has not shown me, knock on wood, that he can't make it through a season. So
no, and he took a massive headshot last season that most would not have come back from. And he was back on the field, I believe, a few plays later. Right now, in way too early ADPs, he's going as RB3, 3 overall, only behind Saquon and Zeke and in front of CMC and Melvin Gordon. We'll touch on CMC in a little bit. I think Kamara is definitely going right around where he should be going.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's always arguments at the top of the draft of who you prefer there.
Listen, I can't argue with any of that. Those top 4 guys, they are rock solid RB1s. I would take all of them in front of Melvin Gordon because I can't trust Melvin Gordon to be there for me at the end of the season. Those other 4 guys have proven that they will be there for me at the end of the season.
You got that right. Real quick before we move on, I do have to touch on Mark Ingram real quick because I'm just going to say it. I liked Ingram a little too much coming into last season, but I had good reason to do so because he had finished as RB6, RB8, RB11, and RB15. But that was all before Kamara's emergence and Ingram's PED suspension. We had him ranked as RB5. He finished as RB32, RB28 in points per game. Now he is the guy in Baltimore, currently being drafted as RB19, 38 overall behind Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, and in front of Devonta Freeman and Tariq Cohen. Jay, how interesting of a group is that?
Oh boy, that is a very interesting one. Boy, there's a lot there, and you know what? I can't give you a short answer. I think he belongs in that group, but I couldn't tell. I mean, I think Derrick Henry. Oh man, I don't even know. Aaron Jones too.
Derrick Henry's the first person you said. Everybody heard it. I'm not editing it out. You heard Derrick Henry's the first person that came out of his mouth.
Nope, I'm dying on this hill. Never Henry. All right, moving on.
Well, I will say, I do think RB19 is a little bit too high. It's not insane.
No.
Me and you always like to try to identify those max value spots. I definitely don't think that's a max value spot. Yeah. But I will say if that backfield shakes out right, he should have no problem being a rock solid RB2, which that's what RB9 is. But that workload distribution remains something to be seen this offseason.
And we've seen the Baltimore backfield produce legitimate fantasy points. So that is something to keep an eye on, but they do love running back by committee, and they show a tendency to not stick with one guy for the duration of a season. So, I mean, I like the situation. I see the potential. I'm not sure if I'll trust it quite yet.
A couple things he has going for him. Number one, he finishes RB32 in rushing attempts last season. That's 138 rushing attempts. I don't think he's going to have a problem with that going up whatsoever.
True.
He was RB28 in rush yards with 645. I don't think that's going to have a problem going up whatsoever.
True.
And then you also look at his efficiency, yards per carry, minimum 65 attempts. He was tied for RB17 with 4.7 yards per carry.
Oh, okay, so he's going right around where he should be as RB19. So again, I have no problem with that price. He's in a group where it's just, we always say it. We want to see a little bit more value.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch for sure and a fun one to preview. I have no no doubt.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next backfield, it's the only group in this division that's not really exciting.
Right.
It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running backs. And when the best running back you have to talk about is Peyton Barber, you're doing it wrong.
Okay, listen, we entered the season with Peyton Barber saying, not exciting. And we had him ranked as RB 59 going into the season. Nothing too attractive there. Now, he did finish as RB 31, RB 42 in points per game. So again, kind of but.
And really inefficient, Jay.
Yeah, he was RB 9 in rush attempts, Ben.
Yeah, just say that out loud. RB 9 in rushing attempts with 234, but yet he finished as RB 42 in fantasy points per game.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah,
No.
And he was RB 46 in yards per carry. So again, like you said, inefficient, so tough to trust. But read this quote from Jenna Lane at ESPN.
Well, as of March 21st, she wrote an article saying that Peyton Barber had re-signed to a one-year deal at $2.125 million. That's But the interesting part is that Bruce Arians was quoted while at the combine saying, quote, "I love him. When you watch him on tape, you don't see his 230 pounds. You would think he's a 205-pound running back because he's got great feet. Not every back's going to be a home run hitter, but if he gets those 10, 15-yard runs, breaking tackles, power runner, punishing runner, that's kind of how I like to start. When we're building something, that's the kind I like to build around," end quote.
See, now that's an interesting quote. I know it's not appealing, but we just talked about the volume. It seems like the volume's going to be safe, but again, with that volume, he only
different
put up
coaching
RB
regime.
I know.
I
but
mean,
even with elite volume, the guy managed RB 31. Can he improve upon that? Sure. Is he going to be better? Currently, he's going RB 51 in drafts, 139 overall, very late in drafts. Is he going to beat that? Is he a value at RB 51? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think that's indicative of people expecting Ronald Jones to take a step and be tabbed as the guy, if not for them to draft additional talent or whatnot. I know it's silly season right now, but when you have Bruce Arians saying such glowing things, it's one thing to talk about a guy. Yeah. It's another thing to demonstrate that you have clearly taken the time to study him on tape.
Right.
So we really need to see what happens. Right now, they haven't brought any other running backs in, and all they have is Jacquizz Rodgers, he's a free agent. He's not fantasy relevant. We love Jacquizz on this podcast. In 2017, he had some really nice fantasy relevant days, but unfortunately, those days are probably over. The only other guy in this backfield that has a chance of pushing Peyton currently is Ronald Jones.
Yeah, real quick, though, to touch on what you said, it's one thing for a coach to be complimentary about a player. You expect that. But when you hear a coach say he's a guy we like to build around, that's something you do need to kind of keep an eye on, especially when you're looking for volume, because volume equals points. So then we go to Ronald Jones, and he looked very underwhelming in the 2018 preseason. I mean, it was one of the leading news stories about just how underwhelming the guy looked. We said maybe he was worth a stash in the hopes that he gets better and earns more opportunities, but that's about it. He was the first USC running back to have back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons since Lendale White. In 3 years, he had 591 attempts for 3,619 yards, 39 touchdowns for an average of 6.1 yards per carry. We had him ranked as RB 34 heading into the season with a bunch of unknowns, and boy, was he a disaster. Finished RB 95, appearing in only 9 games. He started the season deactivated for a number of games, on the bench, finally got some opportunities. He was RB irrelevant. He was irrelevant pretty much across the board. When he did get in, his yards per carry, 1.9 yards per carry. It didn't get better when the actual real games mattered.
The efficiency is not there, and it's baffling for a guy coming from a very respected institution of USC when it comes to NFL football talent, and for him to be so dominant there and to come in the NFL and be so underwhelming, it's crazy. And you look at his numbers, they don't help him at all. The best thing he's got going for him right now is that he's being drafted as RB 53, which is an appropriate, irrelevant price. And on April 16th, per Greg Auman on Twitter, Bucks GM said that Ronald Jones is the player who has impressed the new coaching staff the most this spring, end quote.
Well, great. Show me.
Of course. No, I totally agree. I mean, that's my point. When the two best things I have to say about you is that you're almost free in drafts and that your GM threw you a bone in April.
Yeah.
There's nothing good there, really.
Listen, I will listen to hype talk about certain guys who have actually accomplished something in this league and maybe put more value into it. But for a guy like Ronald Jones, there are some times where you can tell me you'll do something. Sometimes I need to see you do something. And for Ronald Jones, I need to see it before I'll listen to anything else.
Now, both he and Peyton Barber are pretty much free as RB 51 and 53 respectively.
Yeah.
So if you want to take a flyer on either guy you think might get a shot on an improved offense, knock yourself out.
Right.
But we do not have high hopes. Moving on, we've got a much more interesting backfield in the Atlanta Falcons with Devontae Freeman. Coming into the season, we noted his consistent decline from fantasy running back 1 to RB 7 to RB 13 over recent seasons. So we called for further regression. And unfortunately for Freeman, Jay, we nailed that one.
Listen, when he and Tevin Coleman came into this league, Tevin Coleman was tabbed to be the RB1 in that offense, and it was only because of injury that Devontae got that initial breakout when he finished RB1 and went on to a monster fantasy season, and he just has never reached back at that level since that point, and we were concerned about durability, and it proved to be true. He played 2 games, went down with season-ending injury. In those 2 games, the productivity was mediocre at best. He had 14 attempts, 68 yards for a 4.9 yard per carry, 7 targets, 5 catches, and 23 yards. Listen, if you can guarantee me he'll be healthy for 16 games, then, I'm sure he'd be a top 5 running back in this offense, but you can't guarantee me that. And we talk about it all the time. I feel like we harp on this more than anybody else out there. Injury and health, that risk is real, and it's got to be factored in, especially in draft price. But also in what you're willing to build your fantasy team around. You need to incorporate that risk into your decision making. And okay, Tevin Coleman is gone. He's now in San Francisco. Devonta's gonna be the guy, so there is some upside there. It's just, what are you willing to pay? And right now, he's going RB20 in drafts, 39 overall, right behind Aaron Jones, Mark Ingram. Guys, we just talked about Mark Ingram, and right in front of Tariq Cohen and Phillip Lindsay. So, interesting group.
Yep.
I like him, but again, coming off of serious injury, the guy in a very exciting offense, but I don't know, man.
This is what I'll say. I like guys going around him much better than him. If you get, quote, stuck and feel like you have to take him, I would hope and pray that week 1 and week 2 he comes out and sets the world on fire, and then you better treat him like hot potato and try and get rid of him fast.
Yeah. and the other guy who was in this backfield was Tevin Coleman, and he was coming into a contract year, and we thought that the path was there for him to have a breakout with all of Freeman's injury concerns, playing for your next contract. The motivation was there. The opportunity was there. He only missed 1 game from weeks 1 to 16, but was still never really able to establish himself as the dominant force in that backfield, and that was very surprising to me, Ben. We had him ranked as RB33 coming into the season. Now, he finished RB18, but he was RB26 in points per game, so, Total Foresight saw really what Tevin Coleman is. We just expected more because of what we saw around him, and apparently we shouldn't have, because again, he finished RB23 in rush attempts, RB22 in rush yards. He finished RB27 in targets, RB29 in receptions. So again, right around that RB33 rank where that Total Foresight had him ranked, and it just, I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are frustrated and disappointed with the lack of production with him being the guy for the bulk of the season.
Yeah, I'll say San Francisco's all of a sudden got a very interesting backfield.
Yeah.
And, the one thing that I do like about Tevin Coleman, at least last season, is minimum 65 attempts. He was tied for RB16 in yards per attempt with 4.8. So that's really efficient, and it's not a small number of carries. He had 167 carries for 800 yards. He's only being drafted as RB30. right now, 70 overall behind Latavius Murray, Rashad Penny in front of Lamar Miller and Kareem Hunt.
How is Rashad Penny going RB29?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening right now, brother. It's crazy season, and the draft tomorrow and Friday is just going to make it even crazier. And, so the rest of this offseason is going to be a lot of fun to see all the little things like that shake out. But as far as Tevin Coleman goes, I don't know that he's going to get a shot to be the guy next year. Evidence this year suggests like if it was ever going to happen, it was going to be now. I definitely like his value as RB30, but again, when we're trying to find those max value type of guys, I'm not sure that he is it. Unless the hype train starts rolling and driving up that ADP price, I'm fine if you take him there, but I'm not super excited about it.
For everybody listening, you can't see me, but I am staring very annoyed at Ben right now. Rashad Penny is going RB29 in front of Tevin Coleman, Lamar Miller.
We've already talked about the NFC West, bro. We will address Rashad Penny once again in the NFC West preview. Don't worry. You'll get your chance to take more shots at Rashad.
What are we doing?
Creating value for the well-informed. There's a positive in everything.
Amen. You're right. You know what? Never mind. He's going exactly where he should go. In fact,
there you go.
What? There's a lot of value there. So
Shut up. You can't go. Don't take it too far. Okay, you can't be on the record as saying jibber jabber like that.
All right, let's wrap this up. Let's go to the Carolina backfield. And this was really a one-man show for this season. And it was all Christian McCaffrey, CMC. Now, our preseason notes said a breakout season was imminent for this hyper-efficient PPR stud.
Boom. Nailed it.
We had him as RB9. He was going RB10 in drafts. We were all over CMC. He finished RB2 overall, RB3 in points per game, RB10 in rush attempts. It's not all PPR, my friend.
No, it's not.
So he's RB10 in rush attempts. He's RB6 in rush yards because of his efficiency. 5 yards per carry, he was RB10. And the icing on the cake, RB1 in targets with 124, RB1 in receptions with 107, RB1 in receiving yards, RB6 in receiving my God, Ben.
107 receptions, 867 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. That's RB1 in receptions, RB1 in yards, RB3 in receiving touchdowns. And that's on top of having almost 1,100 rushing yards at a 5-yard per average clip. I mean, right now, he is going as RB4, 4 overall, and way too early ADP. And I love that value. I mean, he's going behind Saquon, Zeke, and Kamara. And I think that he's definitely safer in my mind from an injury standpoint than Kamara, because he proved to me this season that he can be the guy and have almost 350 total opportunities and was unscathed and a fantasy rock solid stud.
Completely agree. I can't argue with any of that. And you know what? Ben and I will always tell you, we want to keep it honest. We want to keep it real with you. We'll admit when we're wrong. And I got to say, I was wrong about Christian McCaffrey coming out of college. I doubted whether or not he could make it through a full season, taking a beating, taking a pounding, being the focal point in an offense. And I was wrong. The guy is rock solid, durable, dependable, efficient. Every word you can think of in fantasy land, he is it.
Yeah, I mean, but what people need to understand and keep in perspective is that you figured all this out about CMC before we went into the preseason, and we nailed the fact that he was going to break out. And I mean, he's just the efficiency, the explosiveness, it's all there. RB1 overall is in his range of outcomes until further notice. So just enjoy CMC on a weekly basis.
Okay, now, I just told you about how wrong I was about CMC coming out of college and my expectations being different. Now, I was able to redeem myself a little bit in this backfield with CJ Anderson. You know, he wasn't really on radars entering the season. I think once he left Denver, coming off of a little bit of an injury, you know, people kind of wrote him off as just a career backup from here on out. But we did say he is a former 1,000-yard back. He's still young. He's still capable. And he is a guy to keep an eye on if CMC couldn't couldn't make it through a season being the guy. Well, CMC did, and CJ Anderson ended up getting released and then signed. He bounced around.
Yeah, he didn't get traded.
Right. So CJ Anderson ends up in Los Angeles for the Rams, backing up Todd Gurley. And, at the time it was a nice little signing. Okay, they signed CJ Anderson, big deal. Well, we saw what he did at the end of last season. We saw that capability still there. With a minimum of 65 attempts, he was RB1 in rushing efficiency with 6 yards per carry.
Yeah.
The guy still got it.
I mean, you look at him, what he did with the Rams, Jay. Week 16, week 17 in their first playoff game, all he did was have 20 carries, 23 carries, 23 carries for 167, 132, and 123 with 4 total touchdowns.
I love it, man. Okay, so now he's in Detroit with Kerryon Johnson, the young and up-and-coming back, and they've got the older pass-catching specialist in Theo Riddick. So if you are going to be a guy who invests in Kerryon Johnson to be a mainstay on your fantasy team, then you need to invest in CJ Anderson as a cuff going into 2019. I'm saying it now.
Without a doubt. I mean, with what he showed you he can do and being the running back one in the entire NFL, minimum 65 attempts with 6 yards per carry. Like you said, he has the capability. If anything happens to Kerryon, sky's the limit for this guy next year.
Completely agree. All right, man. That's it. That wraps up another episode of this podcast. We did it. We have one review podcast left. The draft is tomorrow night. I can't wait. Listen, we've talked about it all off season. I love the off season. I want chaos to reign for every other team except mine. I hope that the Arizona Cardinals pick Kyler Murray number 1 overall tomorrow. I'm going to love it. The drama. I hope there's trades. I hope things go crazy. Let's have some chaos. Let's make fantasy football fun. Let's make football fun. Let's go, man. I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. We will wrap up the rest of our review pods with the wide receivers and tight ends. After that, we will be taking a look at the NFL draft impact and the rookie reviews and their new landing spots. And then we've got a couple of specialty surprise episodes for you after that coming. And we've got still a lot of fun left to go in this offseason. We're looking forward to it.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.